We all know that theater is a collaborative effort. But at the center of it all is the playwright, whose words bring the show to life on the stage. Hi, I'm Gordon Cox from Variety, and joining me today are Annie Baker, Rinna Groff, Karen Hartman, and Alfred Ury. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. I want to start with a question that probably you've all been asked before, which was, where do you get your ideas?
I'm in the midst of a play right now that opens next week called Compulsion, and with that play, I can answer that question most definitively because that play is based on a true story of a guy named Meyer Levin, and I fictionalized that story in making the play. But when I first, I've had to answer this question, so I have these facts in my fingers. On September 17th, 1995, I was reading the New York Times, and in the book review, there was a review of a book about this subject matter. And I later just discovered this about a year ago when I went to look at the article, but it was written by Frank Rich, and it was a review of this book by a guy named Lawrence Graver, and I ripped it out and I put it in a little folder that says on it, ideas, and then now, however, 15 years later, a play is here, but that was how I got that idea, was from the newspaper.
I think, well, like Rinna says, a light just goes on. You think, oh, that's a good idea. And I don't know why. I know that with Miss Daisy, Driving Miss Daisy, a friend of mine who wanted to be a producer wanted me to go to see a play in Connecticut somewhere. It was a two-character play about a woman in Uganda and a woman in Minneapolis, I think, who never met but corresponded. And I thought, I saw it, and I went to sleep, and when afterwards I said to this friend, I said, my God, Jane, I could write a better play than that. And then I thought about my grandmother and her driver, and the light went on. And different ones, different, but it's always got to have that light go on. And I don't know if they all know why the light goes on. I have no idea.
I don't sit around trying to think of ideas. When I do that, I think it's deadly, and I don't come up with anything good. It is walking around and having a little notebook handy and something. There's some knife in your gut when you hear about something or see something, and then you write it down, and then 2 years later you're like, oh yeah, I had that idea. I also my mother lives in New Hampshire, and I drive to visit her 4 times a year, and for some reason during that really ugly drive up 95 and then 91 in New England, I get ideas. It's somehow driving, but yeah, it is. It's like a light or a knife, however you want to describe it.
Yeah, for me, I think sometimes it's a couple lights have to go off. There will be kind of a background glow that maybe I'm tracking something that I didn't know I was tracking, and then a more personal or more emotional idea, and the glow and the idea somehow go together. The play I've been working on now, Goldie Max and Milk, which is about a single lesbian mom and her Orthodox Jewish lactation consultant that's had a couple productions this season. The glow, I think, was knowing about this Orthodox lady who was a consultant to the new moms of Park Slope, and just wondering kind of what that vibe would be like, and hearing stories about her. And then something went off shortly after having a child myself that was like, I know what the story could be here. I know what the two people could be. I know what the kind of beginning, middle, end piece could be, because I feel like I can track things and not know where the story is for a while. But yeah, those ideas where the possibility of story come out, those are few and far between. And yeah,
Do you have a sense of who you write for? Do you think of it as writing for yourself or for an audience or for someone else?
Combo, mostly. I write for myself, and I don't really direct, but I kind of watch it when I write it in this vague sort of way. And I have some little something, I'm not always accurate about, oh yeah, this is stage worthy, and this is okay, and dialogue comes pretty easy to me, so it's making it drama. I mean, you can't just write the plane took off and the plane landed. You gotta have something go on in the middle, but so it's both for me.
I do write for an audience. I imagine an audience sitting in the theater, and I think about that all the time, but actually when I'm writing, I have to sort of be writing for myself, because the second I start thinking about writing for some who am I going to reach and are they going to like it, and I start writing badly. So I actually, while the reason I got into writing for the theater was this urge to reach a larger, diverse audience, I have to sort of only be thinking about myself sitting in the audience when I'm actually writing, which is a confusing thing. But.
I feel maybe I write for myself and then I rewrite for the audience. Kind of the rewrite is where I think, well, do they have enough? Does a person have enough to track this thing that moves me? Is the information there? But yeah, I would agree. You can't I can't anticipate writing.
How much of yourself do you put in your characters, do you find? Does it vary play to play, character to character, or?
I feel like that's a secret. I don't know.
Right. I think I feel like I never, or rarely, but I think almost never have set about saying, oh, this is like me. And yet at the end of the day, when the actors are up there doing it, I think, oh God, that's like me. You know, that it can't help but come in various ways and in surprising ways. But because you did it, you did it, so you are in it.
Well, I think one of the tenets of writing a good play is you have to be honest. So in that sense, every character is you, because you get up to a point, well, why is she saying this, and why is she doing this, and why is he doing that? You think, well, what makes sense to me about this? So also I've found that you can tell a lot of secrets when you're writing a play. Nobody knows. Nobody, because you're right. So I think you got to be pretty out there. I'm not conscious that now I'm going to tell them about love or whatever. It just sort of comes out, like you said.
And I almost feel sometimes that I know I'm writing well if I feel a little bit embarrassed. That it's like, oh God, someone will see this and they'll know this thing. And
You're out there.
Yeah.
You all agree with that? What do you, any or all of you, have a theory about what makes something stage worthy and what doesn't? What's your sort of thinking in terms of, here I have this idea and this is why it is a good idea to bring that story to the stage?
I wish I could tell you. It either works or it doesn't for me. When I'm writing, God, this is so boring. Can I find a way to make it not so boring? Can they do something? I think that something has to happen. No matter if it's I moved it from here to here. Every time you get a scene going, something has to happen. So I guess but something is my definition of something. It might not be yours. It's so personal. It's hard to.
Yeah. For me, it's like, for me, if I decide something is stage worthy, I think if it feels like both very old and very new at the same time, like I feel like it has some kind of like old universal resonance, but it also feels like, oh, I have a totally different take on it, and no one's ever done that, either whether it's story or character or some like theatrical thing that's happening on stage. Like no one's ever done that before with this important thing that happens to all of us, or so, that there's some combo of the old and the new that feels like resonant and exciting. I think that for me makes something stage worthy.
You were sort of talking about the danger or the fear that it's boring, like that it's just a bunch of people talking. But I also, with my own writing, I sometimes have the fear of, is it too much? Like, I'm working on a play right now where the dreaded word that keeps coming up for me, is it melodrama? Do you know, that is it, the stakes are so high and so crazy, and I set out purposely to do something like that. It was kind of what attracted me. But I'm terrified of it in a certain way, and I'm trying to figure, like, I want it to feel. It's funny, I saw a friend the other day and I said to her, I think I'm trying to make a new genre, and it's pedestrian gothic, that I'm trying to find this way of making it seem real to me and yet at the same time living up to those first impulses. So I think that's another aspect of stage worthy is it too much? I think about that a lot.
What do you struggle with most as a playwright?
Right now, time. Karen and I have talked about this a lot, but we both have little kids, and just I've become a very different. My practice of writing has become very different since having kids. In some ways that I love and that I think are cool, which is I have learned to focus in. I can work for 40 minutes. That's all the time I have right now. I'm going to get something done in 40 minutes. And I used to absolutely be a writer where it was like, oh, at 6 p.m. I have to be somewhere. I couldn't possibly get anything done today because I just need that whole expanse of time. And so that has really changed the way that I approach writing. And maybe it's changed my writing too, I don't know.
My problem is just page one. I got to get the characters to start talking to me. If they don't talk to me, there's not much I can do. So I just kind of sit there and wait for somebody to say something.
And what do you do while you're waiting?
Mess around, watch television. Is that just me?
No, oh my God. For me, it's such like a delicate. I never know when I'm being lazy or when I'm like waiting for the muse. Like it's
And it
this.
can be a long time.
Yeah, and there's been times that I've forced myself to write a play quickly in 3 weeks because I feel lazy and I don't want to be lazy, and I've written terrible stuff doing that. But there's also been times where I've procrastinated for a year and have nothing to show for it, and then finally push myself a little and it happens. So I'm still figuring that. I think that's the thing I struggle with the most is, well, now I feel like if you have kids, it helps. That sounds
In
amazing
some
if
ways.
it's sitting down and being
Right.
productive for 40 minutes, but.
Right. But there's still that same initial impulse thing, and I think sometimes it's about, you described it as they have to start talking. I feel like for me, with every different play, it's something different, but I'll be thinking about an idea and thinking about an idea and thinking about it, and then I'll have some idea or something will become clear to me that will allow me to take that first step, to jump in and start writing, and it could be some formal idea about the way it's presented or what the set looks like, or it could be what the first scene is or anything, but if I'm looking and looking for that, and if I don't have that, I can't start.
I jump in wrong all the time. I mean, I feel like for me, it's just like a really difficult form, I think. And it's a difficult form, it's deceptive because, dialogue is really, it's not that many words, so you can actually write a lot of it in a little time, and yet it can be completely wrong. It can sound good, and yet be the wrong place to start, or the wrong way to start, or it can be wrong in so many different ways. And I feel like that's just the timing is terrible also, but really, even with adequate time, it can still go so wrong so many ways. And there are only really a few ways I feel like each new piece could go right. Do you ever think about that?
Each
It's
one
like,
has its own rules.
yeah, and so you're rewriting it and you think, well, there like are 1,000 ways to make this worse, and there are probably 3 ways to make it better. But what are the odds, that I'm gonna find the right? I just think it's hard.
Oh,
I think that's.
I'm telling you, it gets harder. Unfortunately.
Thank you. Yeah.
When I first
Why do you
came,
think that is?
I don't know. Well, when I first, the first famous writer I ever knew was, who I think is the best popular songwriter that ever was, Frank Lesser. And I worked for him. And he said, I'll tell you, he was writing something new. He said, it's getting bad. I write slow and I throw out quick. And I don't know. I guess I'm a harder judge of my own self than I used to be. And I'm less naive about what's really bad. I know, unfortunately, that if you fall in love with something you've written, it's going to eventually go. Oh, that's so great. And it's the words. And it's the way you put the words together. And that really doesn't have anything to do with making a good play. It's a hell of a way to make a living.
Yeah,
And nobody makes a living at it, so that's not what it is. But it's a compulsion to want to write plays.
So
That's something. Would you choose it for your children? I wouldn't.
That's interesting.
It's too hard.
yeah.
Better than acting, but it's too hard.
Yeah.
Better than acting.
We're all like, yeah.
I know that, which is terrible, but that does make me think when when my little daughter is so emotional, my 4-year-old, and seems to be such an actress, I think to myself, oh my gosh,
What have
please
I done?
no. But when she makes up a story or makes up a song, there's something very fulfilling to me about that creative act and seeing that mirrored in her. But yes, would I hope she goes into the theater? I don't know.
But I mean, that said, I personally think actors are the bravest people
Oh,
I
my
know.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not anywhere near it. I mean, they just get out there and do it.
I know.
And they have more fun. I mean, it's harder, but they have
Yeah.
a lot of fun. I think, most of them.
But then you're putting out there not just what you write, you know, but what you look like. That
Yes.
would not work for me.
That's the part that's hard.
Can we maybe expand, Alfred, on something you mentioned just a couple minutes ago about the things you fall in love with, and it's not just the sort of words together on the page that go into making good plays. So then what is it? How do you think of it? And what is it beyond the words on the page?
I've been thinking about that because I'm writing a 2-character play. And
Is this the one you're working on now with?
from Lynn Meadow.
Yeah, it's.
And it
tell
got,
us a little bit about it.
it got delayed, not through her fault, because I didn't finish. But I sort of have now. So when you only got 2 characters, they don't have anybody else to talk to. And I chose to do it that way.
And what attracted you to
Well, it's an adaptation of a memoir called Apples and Oranges by a woman named Marie Brenner, and it's about a brother and a sister. And it's about a sibling relationship, and that interested me because I'm in one of those. And I think what it comes down to, for me, is deep understanding of the characters. I mean, really deep. And not just where I can hook it into being me, but where I can really understand why they're saying what they say. If I really understand it, I can write it. If I don't, I can't. And people can tell me, well, it's got to have more adventure, more claws, more. I don't know what that means. It's got to be something I can translate. Oh, she really wants to tell him something. And if you can get to that deep understanding, then you can probably write it. But it takes a while.
It's funny when you were saying those things about more claws, or I can remember this moment in time when people kept saying about everything, it has to be more edgy.
Oh, yeah.
Or I expect it to be more edgy, or you're usually an edgier writer. And I just felt like I have no idea what you mean. Like what does that mean?
How about arc and journey? Those are
Oh, God, for me, when I get dramaturgical feedback, for me, it's like, well, it wasn't truth. If you didn't respond to it, then it wasn't truthful, and I f***ed up, and it's not truthful. But it's like, for me, it's like, it's truthful or it's not truthful, and that's it. And there is no other dramaturgical feedback that makes sense. Like, if someone's like, that moment didn't ring true, it felt false and contrived, I'll be like, thank you, that's so helpful. But anything else about arc, or turning point, or plot, or even like character development, as they refer to it. Like,
Don't use adjectives with me. I like what
Yeah.
you said, and I agree. Like, if somebody says to me, I didn't understand that part, I can deal with that.
Totally.
But if somebody says, I wish it was edgier, it makes me want to walk out of the room.
Right.
Because that's
Like, what does that
not only useless, it's debilitating.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you guys, were you trained to work with dramaturgs? Because I never was, and I can't.
I mean, I think we grew up with them,
Yeah,
right?
I think not trained, but it was a fact. Went
So
to
you
school
find
with
it useful?
No.
No.
But you find each other useful.
Yeah.
Yes, I
find
think
other
as a
playwrights
verb,
extremely
dramaturg is something anyone is a useful thing to do. It's a really useful
But those
thing.
people,
Well, it depends on the people. I wouldn't say that, but I think that it's useful to kind of try to enter the world of somebody else's work on its terms, not on your terms.
Right.
And to think, well, what does this work want to be? To try to get inside a work that's not yours and think about it that way can be useful. And it can be useful to have usually another writer. I think writers are the best
well, they know how to talk.
dramaturgs.
Writers know how to talk to each other.
They know how to talk to each other.
But
yeah.
what you're saying about I mean, I think that's why it is such a hard thing to do, because you are entering into someone else's work on their
Yes.
terms, not on your own terms. I don't know that I could necessarily do that. I mean, we do that in a way in writers group because we know each other. But we're also, because we're so comfortable with each other, we can step on toes and it's not the end of the world. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where you can make a mistake and be like, oh, that was a mistake, let me take that back. But something that struck me is when you said that thing about entering into someone else's work, I was reflecting on what you said, because I feel like if someone says to you, that didn't seem truthful to me, that doesn't necessarily mean like they are correct and it wasn't truthful.
No.
I guess it's just some information about
Yeah.
that person and what they experienced, because again, I mean, I have this character on stage right now in Compulsion who is so outsized in what he does, and he's that character is very familiar to me and very dear to me. But I know a lot of people who look at him and be like, no one would behave that way. And I feel like, you're wrong, like, he behaves that way. You know, that is how he behaves.
And sometimes the characters that you really need in terms of plot are the ones that are harder.
Yeah.
If there is a story where there's someone doing stuff that's extreme, those are the characters that I find are harder to kind of pull into truth. And then sometimes the more truthful characters, it's harder to think about in terms of an arc. If that makes sense, there's some kind of balance where there's some kind of balance in the storytelling between someone being forward moving in a way that is at the edge of how most humans move forward, and therefore interesting,
Right.
you know, and being not truthful because they're just a stagey, forward-moving, dramatic figure, you know. So
That's a really great phrase, at the edge of how most people move forward, right? As an idea
like that.
about what playwriting is.
like, well,
It sounds as if having a community of writers around you to help you, Karen and Rinna, you mentioned being in the same writers group, is very helpful for all of you. Is that correct? And what is it about having that community around you that you find so useful? Is part of it that writing itself is so solitary and having people around you is useful and helpful?
I think playwrights. I like playwrights.
I like them a lot.
I really like other playwrights, and I don't think that. I mean, actors like other actors, but I don't think that there are other professions in the theater where people so congregate with their own. So I don't think directors hang out, you know, with 8 other directors in a room, just, you know. And I think there's something about playwrights where we're part writer and we're part kind of gregarious theater person, and that you need to sit in a room, but you also need to see other humans. And I don't think that, I think it's a particular double need that might explain why playwrights group together when they're not, especially when they're not in rehearsal. If you're in rehearsal, you don't also necessarily need to hang out with other playwrights that very same day, you know. But that cycle for me is
I
useful.
also think there's something that you sort of alluded to, Alfred, but it's kind of a silly profession. I mean, in terms of how are you going to make a living, you know.
Probably not.
Exactly. So there's something about finding other people who've made that same silly choice.
It's like being, in the Bedlington Terrier Club. They're not many, but they're rabid people who love Bedlington Terriers. And I think we do all basically like each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And screenwriters, when I was don't ever see each other and just want each other's jobs. And most of us don't want each other's jobs. I mean, that's not.
Well, that doesn't compute.
No.
You
Yeah.
can't get
Yeah.
Each other's
jobs.
Just their slot in the schedule you get.
Yeah, I guess. But it doesn't really feel like that.
And you want them all to work.
Yeah.
You want the plays to work.
And you want good play. Also, the writers I know whom I respect, I just want their plays to succeed so bad. You know, you are. And also, I think 'cause the theater world right now is so kind of conservative and stodgy and problematic that the writers I know who I think are exciting, I'm just like dying for them to succeed because I want the theater world to become a more interesting
And you
place.
want your friends to do okay.
Oh. Yeah.
In the writing process, then, when you're working on a new idea, how soon do you start thinking about practical things like cast size and number of locations, or all that stuff? When does that start to figure into your computation?
I try not to figure it into my computation because, again, the times I've had, like there was this one time when I was like, I want to write a play that would like win a bunch of awards. I was broke and really depressed, and I was like, I want to write a play that wins a bunch of awards, that has a really small cast, that's in one room, like, and I said, it's the worst thing I've ever, and I wrote it very quickly, and it will never be produced, and I would never want it to be produced, and yeah, it's the plays where I haven't thought about that have strangely succeeded and done well. I also have never actually wanted to write a play for a really large cast. So I've also sort of been lucky that my desire is often for a very small ensemble cast. That's been lucky. But.
It's funny, right now I have a play that has it's performed by 3 actors and 3 puppeteers. So it's 6 performers, but there's 3 actors in it, and but 2 of those actors play multiple roles. Now, can I go back and like unpack, did I really, really want them to play multiple roles, or was that some sort of idea that its genesis was in something about we're not going to hire 7 actors, you know? But I don't think so. I mean, I think it's a very exciting theatrical idea, and I love the way it works on stage, and it feels resonant to me. But I have to acknowledge that there's probably ways in which these ideas about what is producible on the New York stage, for example, have influenced me. And it's funny, one of the earliest plays that I wrote, a friend of mine and frequent collaborator named David Herskowitz, who runs this theater called Target Margin, asked me to write something for his theater. And I remember I was talking to him about it, and I said, you know, I think that there's going to be like 13 people in it. And he said, can there be 18? He had some idea about like this cast that he wanted to use, and I was like, I guess so. And so I worked to try to make it be 18 instead of 13. I think I actually took one part and split it into 3 parts or something. They became triplet brothers or something. And so now that play has not been produced so much, but when it gets produced at colleges, where also it's exciting to have a play with that many people.
I once wrote a play because my friend Wendy Wasserstein wrote a play that had a staircase in it, and she had great exit lines going upstairs. I thought, well, damn, if Wendy can do that, I'm going to do that. So I did it.
What play is that?
It's Last Night at Ballyhoo.
Oh, wow.
And I had the same designer. I had John Lee Beatty, Staircase. There's just something really fun about people going upstairs and saying, or whatever they're going to say.
Yeah.
I think we're all going to try our staircase.
Our staircase
playing
plays. I feel a little bit like Annie in that I love the little box. I mean, in a way, when you asked first about what makes something stage-worthy, sometimes for me that is a question of kind of what goes naturally in one space that's going to be, not necessarily one set, but like one actual room where actual humans are going to sit for a long time in one place. And that there's a kind of joy in economy of character. I mean, I think that I don't really want to bring back the days where there are kind of waiters in plays or people that come in and say one thing. I think there's something really nice about casts where to put in an actor, to put in another role is a really big deal, which means that no one's going to be cast in the play who doesn't have a lot to do. I think that's a good thing, though it definitely trains your imagination differently. And I did a piece for students, for MFA students, a Moby Dick adaptation this year. That was also, it was for a cast of 14, and it was really fun. It was just really fun to open it up and say, yeah, each kind of thing that could happen on this boat is going to go to a different person, you know, as opposed to it's all going to be contained. And it was a story I never would have chosen to tell with 4 people, you know. So that was good, and I think that those college productions are a whole nother life, theatrical life, which is exciting too. And so that plays can go to another group of people to get produced where you don't have to pay the actors, and then it's great.
I wonder if you bring up the Moby Dick play you worked on. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about the process of adaptation. I know most of you have done it. You're working on an adaptation right now, and your play is kind of about adaptation right now.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how you think about it. Karen, I think you mentioned to me that you enjoyed it quite a bit, so I wonder if you could talk to me about the process of bringing something to the stage that is a story that exists in another medium,
Yeah.
and that you then put on the stage.
I think I love it because I'm a reader, and so I love the ability to fall in love with and kind of partner deeply with another piece of storytelling that has already endured. And so one of the first adaptations I did was in graduate school. I did an adaptation of the Trojan Women. And I did it for a director's thesis. And I feel like I really learned how to write tragedy by writing a Euripides tragedy, kind of having to put it through my body to make sense out of it. And it completely changed what I thought Karen Hartman, could write about. You know, just having written the scenes that I didn't create, but that I found the language for, I felt like that was my education in tragedy. And that play, which has now been around a long time, is still around. It's mostly colleges, but people are still doing it. There's a reading at Red Bull next month. I mean, it's kind of still in the world, and that's because of Euripides. It's not because of me. I don't kid myself, but there's, to me, it's great to have a break from coming up with story and yet still be able to produce writing. Because I have more of a love for writing than I have a number of stories to tell. So I probably have room to tell other stories as well, you know, so.
I don't think I could write my own play, like that. I like having other interjections in there. I think it definitely feeds my own creativity and my stamina in a certain way that I don't think I could keep up that sort of, it's a very particular stamina, and adaptation can do it. And I've a couple of times done adaptations of more contemporary novels, and again, right, it's fun. You sort of put on your thinking cap in a different way. You want to honor certain things. You have certain responsibilities to honor certain things, but at the same time, trusting yourself that you can find a way to not only understand what's most important in that work of art, but to say it may or may not be the most important thing in this new work of art, and to try to find a way to translate it. And I think that can be really fun.
It can be really hard, too.
It's really hard.
Because the one I'm working on, unfortunately, the source material is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's just great.
Yeah.
And
Did you say fortunately or unfortunately?
Unfortunately.
Right.
Because it's hard to lose all this stuff that is
Yeah.
just not theatrical. And,
But
you know,
you have
finally, I decided, well, then I could just get, I don't know, some actor to stand up there and read the book, and that would do that. So then you have to just, eventually, it's those characters your way. And if the material's not great to begin with, that's kind of easy. God, I didn't like that anyway, but I like everything that Marie Brenner wrote.
Right.
And I couldn't,
I think a way that, after working on one particular thing for a little while, a thing that phrased itself to me was that in books, it's things that have happened in the past somehow, and on stage, it's things that are happening right now.
very good.
And finding that way of taking that feeling of like this happened to this is happening is very tricky. And
Very well put.
and if you're in love with something and the way they presented it as a happened, it's kind of hard to take it and make it a happening. But it's but that's part of that struggle, I think.
When you're writing, have you ever written for a particular actor or group of actors? And Anna, you're nodding. Tell me a little bit about that decision. and
I
how it
almost
works.
always write for specific actors. And I've had the experience of writing for them, and either they weren't available or the theater didn't let me cast them, which was very painful. But I almost always write for specific people.
Can you tell us why?
I guess I don't know, I fall in love with actors and not famous people, you know, like there are just so many good New York stage actors who I feel like are sort of unsung heroes of the theater, and I go through periods of like obsession with different New York theater actors and just want to write something for them they've never done before. I don't know, for me it really helps to have their voice in my head when I'm writing for them.
Well, that was going to be my next question. How then does that fuel the development of the character you're writing?
I mean, yeah, it totally fuels it just because their voice is in my head. I mean, so the play I'm writing now, I'm writing for these 2 actors I know, and then there's a 3rd character, and I don't know who would play her. You know, it's and it is, they're very much the characters. I'm not, you know, I'm writing things the character would say, not that the actor would say, but there is something, I sort of giggle to myself picturing this wonderful actor saying the lines. But yeah, I don't know how it actually would change the character that I was writing. Yeah.
I almost never write with some particular actor in mind when I start. It's really, really rare for me, and I can think of a few exceptions where struggling to find my way in and then thinking, oh, this is the person who would do it, and that allowing me. But very often on like when I'm coming to rewriting, I have someone in mind and I sort of hear it in their voice, and that's guiding me. Although I've never had the experience of that person who's in my head being the person to play the part. And that's fine too. And that's a funny gift. It's something I would never say to an actor. It's like, oh, I had you in mind, but you're not the one doing it. But in a way, their brilliance is what allowed me to write the play. So in a way, it is a testament to how great they are, but I don't think any actor would really love to hear that.
Yeah.
I think the easiest writing is when you're in rehearsal with a play and you got the actors there and their voices are in your ears.
You find that the easiest?
Yes.
Do you find it the hardest?
Amazing. I find that
I find that
impossible.
really hard.
Yeah.
Because why? Because you're afraid that they're influencing it too much, or?
I guess it's not, probably can't separate the presence of the actors from the timetable of rehearsal, but I just find it, all I like to do is cut in rehearsal. I mean, I just want to get rid of, I would cut it to 5 minutes. If I could. I mean, I just want to get rid of everything.
Because I start off at 5 minutes.
Putting things in, I start off at 7 and then, but putting things in, I think that's amazing. And I always wish that, and I do write in rehearsal, but as little as I can. But it's not that the actors get in the way. The actors are great, and that can help.
It's instant
Yeah.
It's instant gratification because you write it and they say it. You know, the next day.
Well, maybe it's instant gratification if you write it and they say it. They say it, I don't know.
I'm a big rehearsal rewriter too.
That's great.
In general, I really like to rewrite in rehearsal.
Well, the director's there and
Yeah.
usually encouraging.
Yeah.
You have a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
That was going to be one of my next question, actually, is how then do you work with the director as you're bringing a new piece to the stage for the first time?
It's important.
How so?
Well, that's your collaborator in a way, and that's the person you trust the most. And I've had a couple of bad, I hope you all haven't, but I've had some mostly good, but some bad ones. And it's like a terrible, terrible love relationship that you just don't want to, the last thing you want to do is like get in bed with that person that day. You just, and it's debilitating and soul wearing and everything else. But a good one is the opposite. You kind of want to do it because you want to do it for yourself and you want to please them, and it's a nice relationship.
What sorts of insights do you find a director particularly brings to a show, to a script?
I don't know.
You mean like helping you rewrite, or actually once you're in rehearsal and they're staging?
Helping you sort of shape the play in your head and rewrite and trim or whatever you like to do in rehearsal. How is it the way a director thinks helps you think about your
Asking the right questions, maybe.
For me, yeah, it's who the director. I mean, ideally the director is someone whom you respect and you share an aesthetic, and so then it's incredibly valuable. I think a director who you don't totally trust or have the same taste as is just the worst. And then when they give you feedback that you don't agree, it's just horrible. But if you're working with someone you like, it's so exciting, and they give you a good piece of feedback, and it's helpful, and it breaks the play open for you. It's the best. You know, it's really fulfilling.
I mean, it's kind of what we were talking about before with dramaturgs. I think a really good director of a new play wears that hat as well. I mean, is in this new piece that may not.
Where's the dramaturg hat, you mean?
Where's the dramaturg hat? Yeah. And hopefully they're doing it in the application of this play to kind of real people in a real actors on a real stage are going to do this material. And so that may be the gap that's between the first draft and the production draft is kind of how does the rubber hit the road once it's moving. And so a good director can help track that, but you're going the same place. Yeah.
I also just think about this thought a lot, that directors are people who spend a lot of time thinking about how to talk to actors and thinking about what can I say that is the most useful thing that I can say to an actor at a given moment. And that is not something that I spend a lot of time thinking
Right.
about. And so I always want to trust that I can communicate with the director and say, this is what's going on for me, like this is what I'm seeing, but I would never want to say, I wouldn't want to try to do that to an actor. I want that there's someone whose job it is to help make that conversation happen. Seems really valuable to me. And I guess what Karen's talking about too is that I find that once you're getting to that place where you're talking about a director, you're talking about the physical life of the show is coming more into the foreground, that it's not just words on a page, but so how are these things going to rise up in terms of the actor, in terms of the set, in terms of all these different things. And that's the beginning of a really exciting conversation that can make you think new things about the play, like I don't need a scene in the bathroom or whatever it is, because it sort of brings things about the play to light.
I think what you said though about getting in there with the actors is so useful, because I think there's a way that we're kind of results oriented. I mean, by the time rehearsals start, I mean, we are mostly done with our work, and so we show up on day one and it's almost like it's our opening night, you know, and everyone else is like, bagels, coffee, you know, here we go. And I don't know, at least I'm like, okay, here we go. And that there's something about honoring people who have to be at the beginning of their process that I find I don't naturally have the patience for. And so it's really good to be able to hand off that patience to somebody else and to say like, okay, well, we know that accent's not gonna work, right? Privately, and to kind of understand, okay, right. So we're gonna try it, and you know, kind of, I'm really very relieved to have somebody carrying the process so that I don't have to carry the process.
And also something crazy too, what you just said about sharing an aesthetic with a director, which I think can be really valuable, but I also think there can be an interesting marriage where you have sort of different ideas about something, and that there are things that I recognize about myself that is like, oh, that's not my taste, but I get that, and that you can find a way of coming together. Sometimes I think you can get the sum is, you know, greater than each of the parts, because there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, or there's some tension
I
there.
agree. I just recently did I'm still working a little bit, a dance piece with Martha Clark, who's about as different from me as you can be. But she's a genius, and I love her work. And we did this piece together about the Shakers, and it just sort of, I worked in the room with her and these dancers, and unlike actors, dancers will do anything. And won't ask you why. And you'd say, after that saying, okay, I'll do it. And I found myself naturally pushed into writing stuff I never would have written.
Right.
And I was so proud of myself.
Right.
Feeling all good. So it's very exciting to.
But do you think it's partially because you were in a new form, like you didn't have these preconceived ideas?
Yeah, and
about
it wasn't my thing. It was Martha's thing.
Right.
It was probably one of the most exciting things I've ever done.
How did you come to that collaboration?
Well, I wanted to write something about the Shakers, and it was just so cuckoo. I knew it wasn't really a regular play, and I had met Martha, and I went up to her at this party. I barely knew her, and I said, "You want to work on a show about the Shakers?" And she said, "Okay."
That's so great.
But I would tell you that getting outside of what you usually do, and it was so exciting.
Did it happen?
Yeah, it happened.
Did it happen?
Happened at the American Dance Festival last summer. It's going to happen in New York, I think. But it's a whole completely other world. And writing stuff for people that really aren't actors, but they're performers, and they're completely comfortable with their bodies, but they're a little shy about that. It's just exciting. You just find yourself, ooh, I can do that, you know?
Is it all dancers speaking?
As opposed to what?
Some actors, some dancers?
No, it's all dancers, but they can act. And Shakers, there were a lot of songs, so they all sing a cappella stuff. It's pretty nuts, but they were. But if you ever get a chance to
Yeah.
push yourself out to that stuff, that was fun. I mean, I felt like somebody should have paid me to do it. They certainly didn't.
Somebody should have made you to do it. That's not a weird feeling to have.
No.
We want to believe that's not a weird feeling to have.
I don't think anybody does dance theater. to get rich.
Who or what do you consider an influence or some of your major influences as a playwright?
I wonder if you guys like feel the same way, but there's like all the old school people who like influenced you, and then there's all the people writing now who influence you constantly. And I feel like I'm learning so much from my peers and the theater I see every week. It's so I sort of feel like I'm influenced by everybody, or like even the plays I hate. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be that play was horrible. I want to make sure I never write that kind of, like. Sort of it's why the theater is exciting, because I feel like it's constant influence. But
I can truly say that the plays of every person who's sitting at this table have made me think about things. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
To make me think, oh, she does that differently than I do, or he makes that setup incredible. He's focusing on a group of people that I'm interested in. It's really literally true that I've had that thought about how did this person do that? And I wouldn't do it like that, but how would I do that? And but I know what you mean about there's the other terrible thing I think about when you start to list people of like this person or that person, because it's the feeling of like, oh, did I leave someone out who's really dear to me or something, or did I put too much weight on something?
And I also feel like that you're always asked to, you didn't ask this, but you're always asked to list like theater influences, and I feel like I've been influenced by music, by novels, by paintings, by so many different art forms have actually exerted equal influence on my writing. I don't know.
Well, I think all of us are professional playwrights, so something that really interests me is what I would go by is craft and who to learn craft from. And I'm pretty hokey because for years and years I taught high school English. And for years and years and years, I taught the Scottish play and Romeo and Juliet over and over and over and over and over and over. And I've got inside of them. And the way that man sets everything up, he says, boy, Lady M, she's acting so crazy. And then she comes in and acts crazy, and then she leaves, and they say, she was acting so crazy. I mean, it's just clear, clear, clear all the time. And since I could never contrive to be either Shakespeare or Chekhov, I can at least have them as models for myself.
I do the same thing. I mean, I still go kind of, if I'm not sure how to handle something in a story, I'll kind of try to think of a Shakespeare play where a similar thing happened and go and see how it's written there.
He knew everything.
Yeah, I mean, he knew everything. And I don't understand how it was possible. I don't understand how it's possible that I can see why people think that one person didn't write those plays, though one person did. But how did one person know everything? It's really strange. I think, yeah.
It's really interesting to see a play like King Lear as an older man and as a younger man, because I now can understand how come he picked the daughters he picked, because they were nice to him. The other one wasn't. I mean,
Do you guys read reviews? Why or why not?
they hurt my feelings. Easy.
It used to be, it started that I stopped reading my own reviews because because I was hurt by them or because of something. But then it got to this place for me where I would read reviews of friends, and then those would bother me and hurt my feelings and infuriate me and make me crazy. And then that circle just sort of expanded to that reading it made me crazy. And so I rarely read any reviews
I check them out, sort of.
of it. I mean, as you say, like you sort of hear these things. But someone once said this really great thing, and I forget who it was who said this to me, but I think an important skill, and I see it happen to myself sometimes, is to never assume that because you read the review, you know anything about what your experience of that show would have been.
Certainly you don't.
But it's hard to remember that sometimes, especially if you hear, oh, it got good reviews, or oh, it got bad reviews, and you start to feel like you know something.
It's the experience.
That you either go to that play and know something about your experience of the play or don't. But yeah, I mean, right, we were talking about it before, it's that cliche, it's like the bad ones heard and the good ones are never good enough.
But the experience of doing the play is all with you, and that stays with you.
Although I can say something, so I just had this experience where I had a production in New Haven, a production in Berkeley, and a production now in New York, and the play has been changing and growing at that time. And before that, I've come to a place in my life where I try not to read reviews, as I said. But this particular time, because I knew I was going to be growing with the play and making changes, there was a certain moment where I thought to myself, you know, some guy in the street can come up and say something to me about the play, and I'm not going to say, no, don't talk to me about the play. I will not hear what you're saying about the play. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, then I'll read what these other people said too. And I was able to read it. It was after the show in New Haven closed, and just to sit down one afternoon and read it and sort of say like, oh, these are some of the responses. I think the thing that's most painful is after your show opens in New York, and it's either, right, your tombstone or your coming out party or something, and that's sort of
But
like
it's not
how we can
anymore,
feel
it's
bad.
changed.
You think?
I think I've lived to see the day where the New York Times Review doesn't really mean anything anymore, particularly.
It doesn't mean anything to like my friends or
Well, it doesn't
me,
mean
but
anything
it
to box office
but it
either.
It does.
it does
It
though.
doesn't mean the
That's the
same
problem.
thing that it used to, I think.
Oh,
you're
it
right.
absolutely doesn't.
It can't kill a show. There are shows that can't be killed by a
Well,
bad
Wicked
review in the
would
New
be
York
a
Times.
good
Exactly.
example.
Exactly. But there are shows that
An
it-
off-Broadway
that it
show
can
can
kill
be killed
Usually.
by a review,
Probably.
Yeah.
which is
All the reviews or just the Times?
by the Times.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think both
Probably
are true, that
the
it's
smaller the show,
The smaller the
Or
show.
made
the
by the
newer the
Times,
people
you know?
involved, the more
Yeah.
the review matters. You know, the more known the people involved, the less the one review. You know.
I guess I'm talking about something different, and that's a revival of a play that was already a success,
It was
Yeah.
already beloved and has an
Yes.
audience.
and that the fact that
think
it
that's
got a
different.
bad review in the Times, nobody even knew.
Yeah.
Because he had a big old
There's
picture of
enough
Vanessa
power,
Redgrave and
yeah.
James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, you know.
Yeah.
But that's a great play that everybody.
I don't know if it's a great play, but it was
It's a
play
great
had a
play.
name for itself.
Yeah.
So I guess that's
Yeah,
what I
that-
mean. I do
Yeah.
know what you mean.
I think that's what we mean too. I mean, I think
Producers talk about that you have to create a certain type of event that is New York Times proof. And there's certain kinds of things that can do that, revivals or huge eventness, like the way that Wicked had.
Or
that
Spider-Man, which is certainly they're going to see.
Yeah. Well,
But now you're talking about real plays. You're not talking about
I'm talking about like a new off-Broadway world premiere.
right.
I think.
unless it gets revived somewhere by somebody who sees it or
But the
does it
chances of
somewhere.
that are much more slim if it doesn't get the New York Times review. And the chance of that are so much more high if it does get the New York Times review. And I'm sure you've had this experience where there's interest in a play and the New York Times review isn't positive and that interest goes, it just goes away. And it's very unfortunate.
You know, we're about to run out of time, but I wondered if we could end on kind of a big question, which is how do you see the role of the playwright in society and in the sort of in the world of the theater and art in general?
My emotional response is like I'm simultaneously like we're irrelevant, and I'm like we're so important. I just careen between feeling like totally irrelevant and actually like I'm doing something really important, and it's so confusing. So curious what you guys.
Yeah, what do you consider important about it, I guess?
I guess I feel, and this is a really dorky answer, like it's something about being a little bit like a blues singer, only much less cool, where I feel like a playwright is by profession trying to experience empathy and trying to put him or herself into difficult positions and painful positions and try to see the way through. And in a best case scenario, that might help somebody else see their way through such a situation. I mean, that's not really a societal answer. It's more of artistic answer, I guess, but in the best case scenario, I think that that's what a writer is doing, is attuning those emotions that I think most people through life narrow or shut off, kind of, in order to tell the bigger stories that people have to live in every once in a while, you know.
I think I think we're like, you know, after dinner and after we've had our bath, I think we're the nurse. I think our job is to like entertain people and get them actively interested in something for 2 hours before they go to bed. I don't think you can make them think, you can make them laugh, you can make them do it, but it's like connecting with people usually at that time of day. I mean, I don't mean that in any flippant way. I think it's true that we basically are entertainers, and it's how good we are at it. So you don't see the sleight of hand. Because, I mean, the greatest plays in the world with the most serious, Aeschylus, you name it, those are entertainments. They may not be everybody's idea of entertainment, but that's what they're supposed to be.
All right, I think that's actually a great place for us to wrap this up. Thank you all for joining us. And thank you for joining us. These programs are brought to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York in partnership with our friends at CUNY TV. On behalf of the American Theater Wing, I'm Gordon Cox, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Working in the Theater.
I'm Ted Chapin, chairman of the American Theater Wing. The Wing has played a vital role in New York's theatrical life for more than 60 years. Best known for creating the Tony Awards, we stand for excellence, but we also support education in the theater, and our work reaches beyond Broadway in New York. The Working in the Theater television programs, which are supported by the Annenberg Foundation and the Dorothy Strelsin Foundation, are unequaled forums for discussions with today's most creative artists. Downstage Center's in-depth radio interviews were created in conjunction with XM Satellite Radio and can be heard on our website. For people who are starting their careers, we have a 2-week boot camp for aspiring actors from colleges across the country called Springboard NYC. And our theater intern group provides a forum for young people who are starting their careers to build a professional network. All of the American Theater Wing's educational and media programs are available for free on demand from our website, americantheaterwing.org. Thanks for your interest in the Wing, and thanks for watching.